What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Art Box. I just got back from the Dollar Tree where I picked up some very unusual items that I turned into Namor's Trident. And the coolest part about it is it's also a water gun. So if you want to see how to use all these crazy items to make one yourself, keep watching. So the random items you're going to need today, guys, are going to be this Hydro Blaster water guns, a broom handle, as well as a plastic basket. All these items I found at the Dollar Tree. They had different blaster guns, but I really liked this one because the handle of it had a really cool design that almost kind of had an Aztec feel to it. So I thought that'd be perfect for the bottom of the Trident. Now the blaster tube alone won't be long enough to be a full standing Trident, so that's where we're going to need the broom handle. Oddly enough, the end of the broom handle looked like it would fit perfectly into the bottom of the push blaster tube. At least that's what I was hoping for when I bought it. So all I did was use this heat gun to melt the glue that was holding this thing together, and with a little force it came right apart. Now it wasn't an exact fit, so I was going to have to use a little bit more heat to soften up the push tube, and from there I slowly twisted and joined these two together. Now you do have to be careful with the heat gun because if you get too close it will melt the plastic entirely, and you guys can see there was a little bit of warping toward the end, but as it cooled off it did create a great seal, and that's what you're going to need to still have this be a functioning water gun. Joining the water gun tube and the broom handles together was just what I needed to extend the height of the Trident. Whoops, wrong show. Anyway, moving on to the next part. Even though the water gun tube and the broom handle gave me great height, I still wanted to incorporate the handle because I really like the detail. Details would make it look more like a Trident than the end of this broom handle. Surprisingly, this wasn't held together by any glue. Just had to give it a couple of quick twists and it came right off. The water gun handle didn't fit quite right, but that's okay. We're just going to use some hot glue to make sure we secure it in place. And just to reinforce the seal, I'm going to go around it with another bead of hot glue. Not only will this keep this in place, but I think it's also going to add to the details of the Trident. Now you can run hot glue all up and down the broom handle to create more intricate designs, mimicking after the traditional Trident from Namor in the comic books, or the more Aztec Mayan looks that they're going for in the new MCU movie. It's entirely up to you. Next thing we need to make are the side arms of the Trident. This can be called the pitchforks, or it can just be called the blade wings. Since mine are so thin, they're going to look more like blades, which is perfectly fine, because then it'll be a defensive and an offensive weapon. I roughly sketched out this template on some 8.5 by 11 paper, and then I cut it out, just making sure the proportions lined up. You're only going to need to cut out one of these and use it for your template, which is where the plastic basket comes in. Now before I went to the Dollar Tree, I took the template cut out with me just to make sure I found a basket that was going to be large enough for me to trace this template. Using the bottom of the basket did make it easier to trace it, for the simple fact the edges of the basket were not in the way, as opposed to me tracing it on the inside of the basket. But when it came to cutting out the template, that was a different story. The key to cutting this type of plastic, you definitely want to have a sharp blade, and you do want to go very slow. Trace over those lines multiple times until you're able to break the surface. But again, that didn't work doing it this way, so I had to resort to cutting the template from inside the basket. Since there was no support at the bottom of the basket, the plastic started to crack in some areas. I already marked everything with Sharpie. It was still easy to see the template lines from the inside. So while I cut out this second half, let's talk about Namor. Who is he really? Well, he's also known as a Submariner, one of the first superheroes to appear in Marvel Comics, alongside Captain America and the Human Torch, not the one to be confused that shows up with the Fantastic Four. Namor first hit the scenes in 1939. It wasn't until 1968 that he got his first Trident, when Prince Namor the Submariner issue 1 was published by Marvel Comics. Over the years, just like Aquaman, Namor has had many different Tridents, which is why if you choose to make your own, it can fit into the long legacy that this character may one day use. Once I had everything cut out, I checked to make sure that everything was lining up, and you can start to see how the Tridents begin to take shape. I wasn't really sure if the hot glue was going to melt the actual tube. That's why I would recommend placing the hot glue directly onto the pitchfork blades. Give it about a second to cool down and then attach it. If the water tube is punctured, you're not going to have the suction you need, and it won't be a functioning water gun. I secured the creases with a line of glue, holding the glue gun about 3 inches from the Trident, making sure the glue would be cool enough before making contact. Now, if you just wanted a fun little toy, you could stop there, but I want something that looked as close to the real thing as possible. I drew my inspiration from a few Tridents that I found online. The bladed pitchfork Trident was the one I was really going for, but I still want to give it some elements influenced by the new Trident from the Namor we're going to get in the upcoming Black Panther 2 movie. So I used some of the remaining pieces of the plastic to cut out some strips. These were going to be used to reinforce the Trident's pitchfork blade. Since the material is already kind of flimsy, I wanted to cut down as much on the flapping as I can, and I thought having these two strips would do the job. I used the heat gun to warm up the plastic so I can mold it around the water tube of the Trident. After marking where I wanted them to go, I attached both of them with hot glue. Even though I like the look of this, the design still was a little flat. So I have a bunch of random little knickknacks all over my art room. These wooden planks actually come in the back of the canvases that I buy. And a long time ago, I bought this bag of random buttons. Don't ask me why, but it's actually going to come in real handy here because I found some that has that indigenous look that I think would go perfect for this Trident. After playing around with the sequence that I thought would look good, I started to attach each one of these pieces using hot glue. After making sure the backside lines up with the front and that everything was dried and secured, it was time to move on to my favorite part, which is painting. So originally I masked off the water tube because I thought it would be cool to show the water inside of the tube once this thing was created. And for the color choices, I went with spray paint. Now, I didn't have any gold spray paint, but I did have some gold acrylic paint that I was going to use to dry brush in the overall details. But these colors made a nice base to build up on. Crazy how the silver spray paint makes this look like actual metal. To get the gold finish that I want for this Trident, I'm going to use this metallic glaze. Also, I'm going to be dry brushing these folk arc silver and gold paints. I was going to use some of this green gloss paint to symbolize some of the algae that might be growing on this staff, but never got around to using it. Once I removed the tape and the newspaper, I realized the exposed water tube just looked way too much like a toy, so I decided to go ahead and spray paint that as well. And that looked a whole lot better. Using supplies, I removed the backings on the buttons just to make sure they lay flat as possible to the surface of the Trident. Each one of the buttons were attached with a generous amount of hot glue, just to keep them in place. Once everything was in position, I started the glazing process with the darker gold. This took several passes to get the look that I was going for, but I was happy to see it was coming along very nicely. I wanted to make sure those other added details looked as close to golden accents as I could, and I did this by playing with a lot of dry brushing techniques, alternating between the darkest gold and the lightest gold. So at this point, I liked it, but I wasn't totally happy with it. I let it dry overnight as I filmed the outro to my video, and the next day I came back in to add some more details that I really think enhanced the look of this Trident. I started out by sketching a design that I later filled in with the dark gold glaze paint, overlaid with a few layers of the lighter gold acrylic paint. Adding those golden edges really made the pitchfork blade stand out, giving it some much needed dimension. After letting all the paint dry completely, it was time to take it out to see how well it would hold up in water. I've never used one of these water gun sticks, and I was surprised at how powerful it was. It could cover a pretty far distance, and it had a lot of force. As you can see, the Trident is perfectly fine in the water thanks to the materials we use, causing no damage to the surface or the overall structure. Now, since you guys have the idea, you can take this and run with it and make your own custom Namor's Trident. If you do, I'd love to see it. Be sure to tag me on Instagram. All my social medias will be listed down below in the description box. I have to say, by far, not only does it make a really cool prop, but the fact that you can also use this as a water gun, I feel no one would be expecting that. Knowing that I wanted to make this waterproof, that's why I chose the materials that I did. Now, you can definitely make a more comic book or movie style accurate Namor Trident, but if you want something that's going to be functional in situations, if you're going to be taking this into water, you might want to use more materials like plastics and metal. Now, I could have easily made this with some PVC pipes, but as you guys know, I'm always trying to give you a low-cost option to make some of your favorite superhero props. I'm super excited for Namor's arrival in the MCU. I'm also very interested to see what kind of powers this Trident is going to hold. If you guys are looking for some more comic book props that won't break the bank, I recommend checking out this one here. That should hold you over to our return next week with a brand new video. Oh, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe before you go.